Tank tops aren't regulation, sweetheart. Cover that up. You're making the real soldiers nervous. The voice cut across the range like a knife, but Eden Wolf didn't even blink. She stayed crouched by the weapons rack, tightening her scope, her jaw still, her eyes calm. And that's when it happened. Her shoulders shifted. The tattoo came into view. Skull, anchor, trident, SEAL Team 6. 3 names inked beneath, clear as day. A silence fell, and then boots. Someone was approaching. 4 stars. General Marcus Keene had arrived. He didn't speak, didn't blink, just stared at the tattoo, then slowly, deliberately raised his hand in salute. The man who mocked her scoffed again. "What is this, a joke?" That's when she stood up, met his eyes, and said, cold as steel, "Those names? One of them died saving you, but he still didn't understand. He couldn't. Not yet." What happened next stunned the entire base. And if you're watching this, you're about to find out why Eden Wolf was never meant to be ordinary. Tell us where you're watching from. Subscribe to Veteran Biker for the full story, and don't miss tomorrow's tale. The ghosts don't rest, and neither do we. The clang of steel rang low beneath the overhang of Fort Tannersville's armory range. Rows of soldiers barked commands and locked bolts, the rhythm of readiness pulsing through the hot grey air. No one paid much attention to the woman at the far end of the clearing. Just another contractor in olive fatigues, wiping carbon buildup off an M4 with quiet precision. Eden Wolf crouched low beside the disassembled rifle, her motions clinical, steady. She wore a basic tank top, tight olive green that clung to the tone she hadn't lost, and over it, a faded work jacket slung halfway down one arm. The fabric slipped further as she leaned into the table, revealing a glimpse of something beneath the skin, black ink, bold, permanent. It curved with the contour of her shoulder and bicep, as unmistakable as it was impossible. SEAL Team 6. Centered beneath the text was a skull, its hollow eyes buried beneath a trident, anchor, and bone. Combat sharp lines that could only belong to one kind of operator. The emblem was military accurate, unmistakable. A private 2 lanes down looked up and froze. His boot slipped off the edge of the table as he stared, wide-eyed, at her arm. His buddy followed his gaze and nearly dropped the cleaning rod in his hand. "Holy crap," the second man whispered. "Do you see that?" Another turned. Then another. Laughter died. Movement stalled. Because you don't just walk around with that kind of tattoo, not on a public range, not without having earned it twice, and certainly not if you're a woman. Eden seemed unaware of the spreading silence. She continued her work with absolute focus, pressing a new bolt carrier into place, checking alignment, calibrating the upper rail mount. The silence rippled wider as heads turned. From the corner of the catwalk overhead, a set of polished boots appeared, boots that didn't belong to any of the trainees or ground instructors below. General Marcus Keene stepped into view, pausing mid-stride as if something invisible had caught his throat. His posture stiffened. He wasn't the kind of man easily thrown. A 4-star general with 3 tours in Afghanistan, 2 combat injuries, and a Bronze Star with valor didn't rattle from casual distractions, but his gaze was locked. On her. No, not on her. On the ink. He descended the stairs slowly, one hand already raising toward the brim of his cap. His aide opened his mouth to ask something, but Keene cut him off with a single gesture. And down on the range, one by one, even the most hardened NCOs had stopped what they were doing. The woman with the tattoo hadn't spoken, hadn't drawn a weapon, hadn't issued an order. But something about the air had shifted. The general's boots touched down on the range with a deliberate rhythm, the kind that announced authority without demanding it. But this time it wasn't command that followed him, it was curiosity, confusion. Eden stood up slowly, unaware of the waves she'd sent across the installation. She wiped her hands on a cloth and reached for a torque wrench, sliding it into place across the buttstock. Her left arm flexed slightly, and the full tattoo came into view. The skull, the trident, the unit no one speaks of unless you've bled under its flag. Keane stopped 3 paces away, his breath caught. It couldn't be. She hadn't aged a day beyond the last photo in her redacted file. Her braid was shorter now, her eyes sharper somehow, but he knew that stance, that controlled posture, the way she scanned the exits without turning her head, the kind of awareness only bred by too many missions that went sideways. He swallowed. Chief Wolf. The name came out more reverent than commanding. The air around them tightened like a drawn cord. Eden's head turned, slow and smooth. Her eyes met his, and in them a flicker. Recognition, distant and careful. Keane's hand rose, straight, firm, the salute of a general, offered to a subordinate who hadn't worn rank in years, not out of formality, out of debt. Eden didn't blink. She didn't salute back. She simply held his gaze, still and calm, and in that frozen second, the rest of the base seemed to realize what they were witnessing: a woman in a tank top, a rag in one hand, a rifle on her workbench, but also a ghost, one of theirs. One of the legends whispered about during night patrols and bar conversations no one would admit remembering, whispers of a female SEAL, impossible by protocol, who vanished after a mission that never made it into the system. And here she was, standing in daylight, covered in sweat and silence, and wearing the insignia of a unit most men couldn't even name aloud. "Permission to stand in your shadow," Keane said quietly. A ripple of confusion swept through the soldiers still frozen mid-drill. Some turned fully now. A few dropped their weapons to low ready. Eden nodded once, barely a movement. But it was enough. The general dropped his hand. "She was never meant to be seen again," he murmured, almost to himself. "But hell, you brought the ghosts back with you, didn't you?" He turned to his aide. "Clear the schedule." And just like that, the highest-ranking officer on base cancelled his day to stand beside a woman who hadn't spoken more than 5 words in 2 years. Because sometimes tattoos speak louder than medals, and ghosts don't need orders to haunt the living. Long before she was a myth in a tank top, Eden Wolf had been a name scribbled in the margins of military paperwork, an outlier, the kind of candidate flagged not for disciplinary issues, but for potential that unnerved command. She was 23 when she entered Naval Special Warfare Prep, already outpacing most men in strength, marksmanship, and psychological testing. The instructors didn't know what to do with her. No woman had come this far, not in this pipeline. They tried to break her early, dropped her into the crucible, a 72-hour survival gauntlet designed to strip away ego and bone. No backup, no food, no light, no map. Only objectives. And the wilderness. On the second night, search teams nearly pulled her out for frostbite when the temperature dropped below 0. By morning, she had already completed her 3rd extraction point. When they found her, she was cooking a field rat over a makeshift tin can burner. She looked up once, nodded, and said, "Wasn't the worst vacation I've had." That was when someone in the back room started taking her seriously, not officially, of course. Eden was added to a shadow roster, unacknowledged, unofficial, quietly tested against live case scenarios that never made it into the logs. One such scenario took her to the Syrian border, embedded with a contractor unit rumored to be under attack from cartel-backed insurgents. She went in with nothing but a pack, an encrypted sat phone, and a sidearm. She came out 5 days later with 17 people, including civilians, alive and airlifted. There was no press release, no medal, just one more line in a file marked "Eyes Only." It was during her 5th year that she was designated Ghost 7, part of a proto-SEAL unit designed to operate without oversight, The kind of team used only when diplomatic options had already exploded and full military response would ignite a war. They were ghosts not by nickname but by function. They went into places no one acknowledged, left without being seen, and the names they carried, the missions they completed, were buried deeper than Arlington. There were 7 members in her last deployed unit, Ghost Team Delta, no names, only call signs. Eden's was Ghost 7. The others had theirs etched into gear, never spoken aloud during missions. It was safer that way. Cleaner. Operation Ember Lens wasn't meant to be a bloodbath. It was a silent acquisition. Intercept a rogue CIA asset selling classified arms to a hostile militia near the Pakistan-Afghan border. Get in, retrieve the data package, get out. Now, they had done worse with less, but someone in a clean suit thousands of miles away made a call, changed the evac point, sent them into a kill box without informing them of overlapping tribal faction movement. The terrain collapsed under them. 3 were dead in the first 20 minutes. Marcus Chen took shrapnel to the lungs. Jacob Reyes was cut down covering the east approach. Aaron Cross. Aaron had dragged Eden out of a sniper's sightline and taken the shot meant for her throat. She killed 14 men in 47 minutes. No rifle, just a knife, and the same pistol she would later hang in her garage out of guilt. She carried Cross's body for over a mile before the evac team forced her to let go. She came back stateside with their blood in her hair. The Navy offered her the Silver Star. She said no. They offered the Distinguished Service Cross. She didn't answer. Medals are for graves, she told them. The living carry the weight. Within 6 days, her resignation was processed. The file was sealed. The team was buried under classified operational loss. Eden Wolf vanished. The only proof she'd ever served were the 3 names inked beneath the sealed trident on her left arm. Chen Reyes Cross, her shadow ran with them. Every step, every morning. And for 5 years not a soul spoke her name, until the morning a 4-star general recognized the ink no one else was supposed to see. The days at Fort Tannersville bled together like spent casings on hot concrete. Sunrise meant weapons checks. Noon meant drills. By dusk, the wind carried the smell of oil, sweat, and metal downrange like clockwork. Eden Wolf arrived every morning before Reveille. She parked in the farthest lot, walked the long stretch to the armory with a metal case in one hand and silence in the other. No one greeted her. No one asked why she never attended morning briefings or base socials. She wasn't on the chain of command. She was a civilian contractor, a ghost with a toolbox. To most of the unit, she was the woman who cleaned guns, sometimes gun mom, sometimes worse. Sergeant Travis Rourke made sure of that. He was tall, loud, and lean, with the kind of grin that always curled at one side, as if every sentence he said was the beginning of a joke at someone else's expense. His unit respected him for his efficiency, his toughness, and his ability to spot weakness from across the tarmac. And he saw Eden as weak, or at the very least, misplaced. He made a sport of it. "Hey, Wolf," he called one morning, tossing a rag soaked with CLP onto her bench. "Pretty sure you missed a spot on the latrine door yesterday. Want me to draw a diagram for you?" She didn't answer, just kept cleaning the chamber of a battered M27 with long, careful strokes. Another soldier snickered. "You know, I heard she got this gig through some veterans assistance program, like a charity slot or something. She probably married someone who actually served," another added. Rourke grinned wider. Maybe she thinks standing near guns makes her tough by osmosis. Eden didn't look up. The bolt carrier snapped into place with a soft, satisfying click. There were no reprimands, no pushback. The silence around her was heavy but learned. The younger soldiers followed the tone set by their sergeant. The older ones, those who might have known better, looked the other way, but there were things about Eden Wolf that didn't match their assumptions. She didn't use manuals. She didn't double-check torque settings. She never second-guessed her part choices or asked for verification. Her movements were clean, too clean, like she'd done it in darkness, under pressure, with time and blood against her. More than once, an operator would find a malfunction in his sidearm, bring it to Eden, and receive it back within 20 minutes, functioning smoother than it had since deployment, but still, she remained the ghost in the corner. It was the third week when Rourke decided to escalate. He entered the armory mid-morning carrying an old SR-25 in both hands like it was a gift. Its matte finish was chipped, scope askew, sling frayed like it had been dragged through gravel and shame. The room fell into a hush when they saw him cross the space straight toward Eden's bench. "All right, everyone," he said, voice booming, casual. "Let's do a little test today." He dropped the rifle onto the metal table in front of her. It hit hard. "Contractor Wolf here thinks she knows her way around weapons. Let's see how she handles this," he smirked. "Call it continuing education." Some of the younger soldiers chuckled. Eden didn't move. She stared at the rifle for a long moment, then slowly set down the barrel she had been cleaning. Her fingers moved toward the SR-25 with the kind of reverence normally reserved for something sacred or dangerous. "Take your time, sweetheart," Rourke said, folding his arms. "We know thinking isn't your strong suit." Eden didn't reply. She picked up the rifle and turned it over, once. Her eyes flicked along the upper receiver, down to the mag well, and across the scope mount. She didn't disassemble. She didn't even power it on. "Gas tubes bent," she said quietly. 3 degrees off center. You use steel-cased rounds, likely 700 or more. Scored the port. Buffer springs been overcompressed, mounts loose, stress fractures here and here. She tapped twice. "Your trigger group's full of dust. You left it chambered during a sandstorm or something stupid." She set it down gently. "And you've got heat expansion microcracks near the locking lugs. This gun isn't just dirty, it's dying." The room was silent. Rourke blinked. She hadn't opened it, not really. Hadn't even cleared it, and yet everything she said could be seen, once you looked hard enough. He tried to laugh, but it came out dry. "Lucky guesses." Eden turned back to a cleaning cloth and resumed wiping the M27 beside her, as if nothing had happened. But the temperature had changed. Even the ones who used to snicker now watched her with something else in their eyes. Not respect, not yet, but wariness, and something colder, doubt. They didn't know who she was, but they were starting to realize they didn't know what she was either. By the end of the week, Rourke had grown quieter, not apologetic, never that, but sharper around the edges, like something about Eden Wolf had begun to irritate his skin, the way an invisible threat does when it can't be named. She had passed his test, but worse than that, she had passed it casually, effortlessly, and now his unit wasn't laughing anymore. They were watching, so he doubled down. "Armory eval coming up," he said at morning roll call. "Senior command wants field weapons reviewed for readiness. We'll be doing it live in front of the inspection team. Wolf, you're on point." Eden looked up from her bench. "I wasn't listed on the roster. You are now." He didn't smile. Not this time. Rourke had prepped for the moment. He'd planted 3 faulty rifles among the rows, each modified with internal errors subtle enough to fool any civilian, even most enlisted. Loose pins, mismatched buffers, a trigger group assembled backward, but functioning just well enough to pass an eye test. The kind of sabotage meant to cause slow failure and public humiliation. When Eden stepped into the inspection bay, half the barracks was there, some openly waiting to see her fail, others just curious. She moved with calm precision. Each weapon was inspected by sight, then touch. No theatrics, no notes, just eyes and fingers and memory. On the second rifle, she paused. Wrong locking lug, a beat, too short. This bolt carrier's from a different lot. It'll stress fracture under repeated recoil. One of the inspectors frowned, checking the paperwork, then quietly nodded. By the third weapon, even the observers had gone still. Rourke's jaw tightened. His trap wasn't working, and then it did. But not the way he planned. As Eden leaned forward to check the final carbine on the rack, her tank top shifted. The room had grown hot. The uniform jacket was long since tied around her waist. Sweat clung to the curve of her shoulder and upper back, and just above the blade, sliding into clear view, was the tattoo. Not the partial glance from earlier, this time the full image. SEAL Team 6, skull, anchor, trident, and beneath it, 3 stars, the names etched so small they looked burned in. A corporal across the room saw it first. He froze, elbowed the soldier beside him. That one pulled out a phone, not to film but to zoom, to confirm. He didn't say a word. He just uploaded the still to the unit's internal channel, captionless. Within 7 minutes, the image had made its way across the base. Within 10, it had reached a man who hadn't seen that ink in over a decade. General Marcus Keene. And when he opened that photo on his secured tablet, he sat down mid-step in the middle of a corridor. Keene stared at the image, his knuckles whitening around the tablet's frame. It wasn't just the tattoo, it was the skin around it, the faint sheen of scar tissue, the precision of the line work, the angle of that shoulder. He'd seen it once before, in a field hospital somewhere in Helmand, back when Ghost 7 had pulled his recon team out of an ambush that should have turned them all into names on a wall. He tapped his earpiece. "Divert my route! Reroute my staff! I want eyes on the Fort Tannersville Armory in 20... Discreetly. "Sir," his aide replied, startled. "I said 20. Clear the corridor." Back at the base range, Eden was already wrapping up the inspection. The observers had grown unnervingly quiet. Whispers circled in corners. A few faces looked toward her, not with mockery now, but something closer to awe. She noticed none of it. But Rourke did. He watched the shift unfold like an incoming storm. Watched how the ones who used to snicker now whispered behind locked jaws. Watched how no one laughed when she walked past anymore. He followed the subtle glances, the muttered, "Did you see that ink?" The way a private snapped to attention when Eden brushed past his shoulder, and he felt something new crawl up his spine. He returned to his quarters and opened the secure archive channel, inputting a clearance code he hadn't used in 2 years. Searched for a unit that didn't officially exist. Found a single declassified still from an old hostage extraction op, blurry, dust-filled. But one figure at the center, knife in one hand, sidearm drawn, face half-turned, had a stance eerily familiar. His pulse ticked higher. There were whispers about ghosts, about women who weren't supposed to serve but did. Units that operated under no flag. He looked again at the image, zoomed in. The left arm bore a trident, just like hers. By the following morning, the silence around Eden had changed flavor. It wasn't cold anymore. It was careful. She entered the range with the same quiet grace, her jacket tied loosely at the waist again, tank top soaked from the already blistering heat. No one called out to her. No one threw rags or made jokes. The floor beneath their humor had shifted, and no one wanted to be standing on a fault line. But Rourke wasn't finished. He stood just beyond the loading bay, arms crossed, watching her as she unpacked a weapon case. His eyes didn't blink. They tracked every movement, every breath, every tilt of her head. "You hiding something, Wolf?" he asked finally. Eden didn't answer. "Just checked the buffer alignment on an M4 and moved to the next." He stepped closer. "That ink, SEAL Team 6, right? Looks damn authentic. Maybe a little too authentic. Still nothing. You know, impersonating a special warfare unit is a federal offense," he added. "Voice low now, sharp as the edge of a bad memory. Even if you did serve, if you're wearing something you didn't earn." Eden slid the bolt forward. Then what? He froze. For a second, her voice, so rarely heard, landed like a hammer, even, unapologetic. Rourke took a breath. "You think you scare me with that stare? I've seen operators lie about worse. You come in here acting like some kind of mystery, letting us guess. I didn't let you do anything, she replied. You chose to assume. He blinked. It was the most he'd heard her say in a month. Rourke leaned forward, just enough that only she could hear him. You don't get to stand there with 3 names on your arm and pretend you earned them unless you can prove it. Eden didn't move, but something in her eyes narrowed, not in threat, but in grief. They're not mine to prove, she said. They're mine to remember. He stepped back as if he'd been struck. No anger, no defiance, just truth, and a kind of sorrow that lingered in the space where sound used to be. The confrontation ended without a shout, without violence, just the kind of tension that hangs in the air long after everyone's walked away. Eden went back to work. That's what she always did. But someone had been watching. Leo Delgado emerged from the back corner of the armory where the long-range rifles were stored. Most people didn't even notice he was on shift that day. Leo was like that, unremarkable until he wasn't. He moved slowly across the concrete, quiet, deliberate. His sleeves were rolled up. Grease lined the edges of his palms, but there was something about the way he walked, like he was still measuring terrain. He stopped beside Eden's bench. She didn't look up, but he nodded anyway, just once. To Rourke, who was still lingering near the door, Leo spoke clearly enough for everyone within earshot to hear. You ever wonder why no one's touched her all this time? Rourke narrowed his eyes. What are you talking about? Leo unwrapped the band around his forearm and rolled his sleeve higher. There, on the skin of his bicep, inked in dark lines now faded with time, was a trident nearly identical to Eden's, the same curve of the anchor, same dagger tip embedded behind the skull. Only his bore one extra mark, a vertical hash through the skull, an Overwatch identifier. I was Cross's swim buddy, Leo said quietly. Bud's 249. He wrote me before he deployed. Told me if anything happened, there was someone who'd take the weight of it all. His eyes flicked to Eden, then back to Rourke. She didn't ask for backup. But some ghosts don't walk alone. Eden didn't speak. She just kept her head down, working on the trigger group in front of her. But her hands paused for a second, long enough to feel it, the weight of someone stepping forward. Rourke looked between them. You were watching her? Leo nodded. The whole time, because I knew one day some asshole wouldn't understand what she was carrying and might need to be reminded. Around the room no one moved. Even the laughter that usually lingered like smoke had vanished, because sometimes when you see 2 ghosts in the daylight, the only respectful thing to do is shut up and let them walk. The sky over Fort Tannersville was clear that morning, cloudless, surgical, the kind of blue that made metal flash too brightly in the sun. Soldiers stood in rank and file across the west field, boots aligned, rifles shouldered, the buzz of upcoming inspection running low through the air like current. It was the kind of day where performance mattered, where every crease in a uniform spoke of discipline, and every bead of sweat dared not fall without permission. The brass was coming, everyone knew it, but no one expected who stepped out of the armored black SUV that rolled to a halt just beyond the parade line. 4 stars glinted on the shoulder boards of General Marcus Keene. His posture was crisp, despite the decades in his knees, his face unreadable, the calm before an old storm. He wore the dress greens today, because when ghosts rise from the dead, you wear your medals to meet them. He didn't speak when his aides stepped out, didn't greet the base commander or shake hands. His eyes scanned the field, until they landed on her. Eden stood off to the right of the main formation, not part of it, just outside the line near the weapons staging area, wearing what she always wore, tank top, boots, a work jacket tied around her waist, and ink on her arm, visible now, fully. Keene moved before anyone could stop him. He cut through rows of enlisted men like wind through high grass. People moved, parted, confused by protocol that no longer applied. Sir, the base colonel stammered, hurrying to catch up. Do you need a podium or? No, Keane reached the front line, then past it. Walked another 10 paces until he stood directly in front of Eden Wolf. She didn't salute, didn't move, didn't flinch, and Keane... He did something no one had seen a man of his rank do in decades, especially not to someone out of uniform. He stopped, straightened, and raised his hand in a perfect military salute. Right hand sharp, fingers tight, eyes locked on her, not as a subordinate, but as something else, something rarer, a peer, a myth, a soldier whose war never got a parade. Eden blinked once. Her expression didn't change, but the entire base held its breath. Because this wasn't in any manual. No one moved. Even the wind stopped, as if nature itself had paused to understand what it was witnessing. Dozens of soldiers, SEALs, Rangers, support crew, officers, stood at attention, but their eyes were no longer on the flagpole or the field commander. They were on her. On Eden Wolf. Keane lowered his salute with the gravity of ceremony, but he didn't step back. He spoke without a microphone, yet every man and woman within 50 yards could hear him. Chief Petty Officer Eden Wolf. Ghost 7, first of her kind, last of her team, sole survivor of Operation Ember Lens. The words detonated like ordnance. The formation rippled. Someone audibly gasped. A few heads turned toward each other in disbelief. One of the younger SEALs nearly dropped his weapon. "She's the reason I'm still breathing," Keane said, voice firm now. "Her team saved mine in Kandahar. We were pinned. No backup. No way out." Then a ghost stepped out of the dust. He turned slightly, addressing everyone now. "She neutralized 3 hostiles before my men could blink. She dragged one of ours bleeding out from the chest, half a click through mortar fire. And then she disappeared before we could thank her." Keane looked back at Eden. "I've waited 15 years for the chance to salute her. Today, I finally got it." The silence was thick with realization. Slowly, almost cautiously, Eden reached for the edge of her tank top and tugged the fabric higher over her shoulder, just enough for everyone to see. The tattoo, full, raw, undeniable. SEAL Team 6, skull, trident, anchor, 3 names below. Marcus Chen, Jacob Reyes, Aaron Cross, and beneath them, etched in thin lettering never forgotten. A rustle swept through the ranks, the kind that happens when hearts shift, when pride collapses into shame, when a myth turns human and more powerful for it. Even Rourke, standing rigid just outside the staging area, couldn't breathe, his eyes locked on the names, one of them carved straight into his history. Keane's voice returned, quieter now. "She didn't ask to be honored, she never will, but that doesn't change what she is." He faced Eden again. "For the record, Chief, welcome home." Eden didn't reply. She didn't need to, because in that moment she had said more with silence than 100 parades ever could. Travis Rourke didn't move for a full hour after the ceremony ended. He stood behind the staging platform as the soldiers dispersed, as Eden packed her tools in silence, and as General Keane disappeared into the back of a black SUV. But the weight in Rourke's chest didn't budge. Aaron Cross, that name was stitched into his memory long before it ever made it onto Eden Wolf's shoulder. Aaron wasn't just some SEAL on a legendary ghost team, he was family, blood. The older cousin who taught Rourke how to climb trees, tie knots, shoot straight. The one who covered him when their dad got drunk. The one who always said, "One day you'll serve too, but you better do it right." They'd taken different paths into the Navy, but always stayed in contact, right up until Aaron's final deployment. Then, radio silence. All they told the family was that he died on an op too sensitive to explain. Closed casket? No details. A folded flag and a letter that said nothing at all. Rourke had carried that bitterness like lead in his bones for years, until today, until the moment he saw Aaron's name tattooed into the skin of a woman he had mocked, belittled, tried to humiliate. And now, it wasn't shame that clawed at him. It was grief. Grief that someone else had held Aaron's final breaths. that someone else had borne the cost. And it was her, the woman he'd tried to break. He walked to the edge of the armory, leaned both hands against the wall, and just stood there, eyes shut, shoulders locked. He remembered that name from the old stories, Ghost -7, always whispered, never explained. Now it had a face. He didn't notice Leo Delgado approach from behind. The older man didn't say anything at first, just stood beside him, arms folded, watching the gravel shift beneath their boots. "You feel it yet?" Leo asked. Rourke didn't look up. "Feel what?" "The truth, when it lands." Rourke swallowed hard. "I spent weeks treating her like some fraud, like a joke." Leo nodded slowly. "And she let you, because that's what ghosts do." A long silence passed between them. Then Rourke spoke again, voice strained. "She never once said Cross's name. Not to me, not to anyone." Leo's voice was gentle now. "She didn't have to." That evening, long after most of the base had returned to routine, Rourke found her alone behind the armory. Eden sat on a wooden crate, sleeves rolled up, cleaning a sniper bolt in the dying light. No fanfare, no company, just her and the ritual of silence. He stood there for a moment, unsure if he had the right to speak. The wind picked up slightly, brushing dust across the concrete between them. "I didn't know," he finally said. Eden didn't look up. "I didn't know it was you," he continued. "I didn't know you were with him, that you were the one who—" He couldn't finish. "I looked for answers for years," he said, voice cracking. "We buried Aaron with no truth, no closure, and I thought maybe someone screwed up. Maybe someone let him die." That got her attention. She looked up, eyes calm, unreadable, and then Rourke whispered, "I found out he died saving you." Eden stood slowly. The light hit her tattoo again, the 3 names catching the amber hue of the sunset. "He didn't save me," she said quietly. "He made sure the mission ended the way it had to." Rourke shook his head. "He would have followed you into hell. I know him. He did." They stood like that for a beat. No anger, no accusation, just the echo of loss between them. "I don't deserve to ask this," Rourke said, swallowing hard. "But if you're going to train anyone here, I want in." Eden studied him, not as an officer, not as the man who had mocked her, but as the boy who'd once looked up to Aaron Cross. "You'll have to start over," she said. He nodded. "No ego, no shortcuts." He nodded again. She extended the sniper bolt toward him, still unfinished. He took it gently. "You'll help build them," she said, "before you try to lead them." And with that, Eden Wolf turned back to her kit, leaving Rourke holding the piece of a weapon he didn't yet know how to use, but finally understanding what it meant to earn the weight of a name. Over the weeks that followed, the shape of Fort Tannersville changed. Not structurally, buildings still stood where they always had. Drills still rang out each morning. Boots still struck gravel in perfect timing. But in atmosphere, in rhythm, in the unspoken shift that came when respect stopped being a formality and started becoming a pursuit, Eden Wolf never took a rank again. She never wore a uniform, never signed back into active duty, and never once requested status. But every morning at 0430, before the sun breached the tree line, she unlocked the weapons bay, laid out stripped-down rifles across 3 benches, and waited. And slowly they came, at first just Leo Delgado and Rourke, then 1 or 2 of the curious SEAL recruits who had heard whispers about the woman with the ghost tattoo, then more. They didn't ask for lectures, they came for the way she moved, for the precision, for the silence, and for the names on her arm that meant something more than the ribbons on their chest. She didn't teach like the others. She didn't yell, didn't push reps, didn't punish sloppiness with barked orders or cold stares. She just corrected. Once, maybe twice. And somehow the corrections stuck deeper than any shouting ever could. Rourke stayed close. He was different now, leaner, quieter, but sharper. He watched everything, absorbed every unspoken rule. treated every bolt assembly like a lesson in restraint, and in time he began helping. By the second month, Eden let him run warm-ups. She never said she trusted him, but he knew what it meant when she handed him her own rifle for cleaning. On the 10th Friday, General Keane returned. No ceremony, no driver, just him, alone. He stood at the edge of the training field for almost an hour without saying a word, watching them move through close-quarters drills. Eden correct a grip. Leo fix a misaligned sight. Rourke teach the younger ones how to feel the click before the fault line in the trigger. When the session ended, Keane approached. "You rebuilt them," he said. Eden nodded once. They rebuilt themselves. He looked at her for a long time. "Come back," he said softly, "not to the roster, to the mission." Eden met his eyes, unblinking. "I never left." The change came subtly. One morning, Eden didn't unlock the armory at 0430. At 0445, Rourke arrived, finding the doors already open. The benches were laid out, gear arranged with surgical precision, just like always. But Eden wasn't there. Neither was her rifle. Rourke said nothing. He simply picked up the first weapon and began the warm-up alone. Leo joined him 10 minutes later, then the others. But her absence felt louder than any drill. By the third day, rumors began. "She's gone." She was reassigned off-grid. Command pulled her back into Black Ops. She was never here. But the fourth morning brought something new. On Eden's bench, neatly folded under a canvas tarp, lay a small olive-green duffel. Rourke was the first to see it. He didn't open it at first, just stared. There was a note. 4 words, handwritten on torn MRE packaging, "Pass it the right way." Inside the duffel, her tools. A bolt carrier she had rebuilt 17 times. A sidearm no longer regulation, but clean to perfection. And at the bottom, a single photo. It was old, worn at the corners. 7 figures standing in dusty uniforms. No names. One woman in the center, just slightly turned away, almost unrecognizable, but unmistakably her. Behind the photo, taped flat, an Overwatch coin. Leo held it between his fingers like a relic. "She's not coming back," he said quietly. Rourke didn't respond. His hands were still wrapped around the canvas strap, but in his chest something locked into place. Not grief, not abandonment, but legacy. She hadn't left them empty. She had just stopped standing in the light. Weeks passed. The sun still rose over Fort Tannersville with military precision. Reveille still sounded. Formation still stood. But there was a new rhythm now. One that didn't come from command or protocol. It came from the bench. The one Eden Wolfe used to sit on. The one she left behind. Rourke never missed a morning. He arrived at 0430 sharp, opened the armory, laid out the weapons, just as she had. Sometimes Leo joined him, sometimes a few others. Some mornings it was a full class, others just silence. But the method remained. No shouting, no rank, just steel breath focus, just respect, not given, but earned. They called it Ghost Hour. Recruits who heard about it thought it was some unofficial drill, a way to impress command. But those who stayed long enough understood it wasn't about performance. It was about memory, precision, discipline born from loss. One by one they began to ask questions. Who was she really? Did she fight? Was the tattoo real? Rourke always gave the same answer. She never wanted you to know. She just wanted you to be ready. One afternoon, a shipment of new trainees arrived. Among them was a sharp-eyed female corporal who looked far too young to be in a SEAL candidate program. After the formal tour, she stayed behind, watching the Ghost Hour from a distance. When Rourke asked why she stayed, she pointed to the Overwatch coin nailed into the side of the bench. "My brother had one of those," she said it belonged to someone who saved his whole unit once. Rourke nodded. "Then you're already in the right place." That night, under the fading light of a quiet sky, Rourke walked to the far edge of the compound. Just beyond the training grounds there was a stone wall where old unit patches were sometimes pinned as tribute. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. It was her name tag. He placed it gently against the wall and fixed it in place with the same bolt she used to carry in her gear bag. No plaque, no ceremony, just 2 words written below with a black marker. Still watching, because Eden Wolf never vanished. She became something else. A presence in the way rifles were handled with reverence, a memory in the hands that learned to fix, not just fire. A silence that spoke louder than any rank. And for those who trained at Fort Tannersville from that day on, there was only one rule during Ghost Hour: no shortcuts, no questions, and never dishonor the bench. And so her name was never etched in marble. No folded flag, no national headline, just a bolt, a bench, and a generation she quietly shaped from the shadows, because Eden Wolf never asked to be remembered. She simply made sure no one else was forgotten. Thank you for watching this story on Veteran Biker. If this tale moved you, if her silence spoke louder than words, we'd love to hear what you think. Drop a comment below and tell us, what part of Eden's story stayed with you the most? Or, have you ever met someone like her? Your thoughts, memories, and reflections are what make this community powerful. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Veteran Biker so you won't miss the next story that hits just as deep. And if you're ready for more, check out the next videos waiting for you right here on the end screen. Each one uncovers a truth, a legacy, or a warrior hidden in plain sight. Until then, ride with purpose, and remember the quiet ones who carried us all.